For people who might not have listened to your prior 2 appearances on the show, why don't, from a high level, you just give us a, sort of overview of what nitric oxide is, what it does in the body, and we'll start there.
Yeah. It's a gas. It's naturally produced. It's really a hormone. We discovered in 2007 that nitric oxide is a hormone. But it regulates blood flow, regulates oxygen delivery, mitigates inflammation. It's a neurotransmitter in the central nervous system. It's how our immune system kills off bacteria, viruses, really any pathogen. It controls really exercise performance, sexual performance, cognitive performance. So it's this naturally produced molecule that, as we age, typically we make less of it. And the loss of nitric oxide is responsible for all age-related disease.
And how can we boost nitric oxide? I mean, there are a lot of products on the market now that promise to boost nitric oxide, to modulate that pathway. Are any of them worth investigating?
Unfortunately not. What we try to do is focus on understanding the physiology and biochemistry. So we try to instruct people to stop doing the things that are disrupting the natural production of this molecule. And so if you stop doing the things that disrupt it and then give the body what it needs, let the body produce this molecule on its own. But, what we've focused on over the past 25 years in basic science and academic medicine, where I was a professor of molecular medicine for a number of years, is trying to figure out, okay, how does the human body make nitric oxide? What goes wrong in people that can't make it? What are they doing to inhibit this production of this molecule? And then can we develop safe and effective product technology that gives the body a source of nitric oxide, but also improves the body's ability to make it? And so we've had products on the market now for a number of years, as you're aware. But, there have been so-called nitric oxide products on the market since the late 90s. And I've tested probably every product on the market out there that's labeled as a nitric oxide product. And, I can confidently say that about 99% of them don't do anything. A lot of companies are throwing a lot of ingredients, amino acids, antioxidants in a bag and calling it nitric oxide. And I think it's just naivety. They just don't know the biochemistry. They don't know the enzymology. So it's a little bit, they're just naive and ignorant. But there's obviously a huge market, huge demand for nitric oxide. So a lot of these companies are trying to provide a product to market it as nitric oxide so people will buy it. But I'm finding that it's quite dangerous. Because what we do is we go out and talk about the importance of nitric oxide, how it works in the body, why you need this critical molecule. And then inevitably people call me and go, Nathan, we heard you on a podcast. We've listened to your lectures. I've been taking a nitric oxide product for 10 years. And I just tried a new one, tried another one, and it didn't do anything for me. So nitric oxide must not be that important. So that's a really dangerous and unfortunate misinterpretation, because it's not that nitric oxide's not important, it's critically important. But the products that they were taking, they were, I guess, deceived or, defrauded.
Ineffective.
By these companies. Yeah, because they're ineffective. So the whole point is those products don't help the body produce nitric oxide, and so the consumer, the patient, interprets it as, well, nitric oxide must not be that important because it didn't improve my health. Yeah, and that's what we're trying to really eliminate that and really inform and educate consumers so they can make informed, educated decisions on products that can restore nitric oxide.
I appreciate that. So our bodies make it naturally, and so often we're simply getting in the way of that natural production process. Yeah, whether it's like disease states, diseases of modernity, eating a poor diet, that an antioxidant depleted diet, or conversely, it's not giving the body the appropriate raw materials to create this gas.
Well, what we're finding is that the body's never out of the raw materials or the precursors to make nitric oxide. So there's a couple of things that happen. Number one, the enzyme that's found in the lining of the blood vessels becomes uncoupled, so it's oxidized, and it basically renders it dysfunctional. So now you can activate, stimulate till the cows come home, but that enzyme isn't working, so it's not going to produce nitric oxide. So we figured out how to recouple that. Then the other problem is about 20 years ago, we discovered that there's certain oral bacteria that are responsible for the production of nitric oxide. And remarkably, these bacteria and their ability to produce nitric oxide can help regulate blood pressure, systemic blood pressure. So the oral bacteria are regulating systemic blood pressure. So now we're finding that people who use antiseptics, whether that's fluoride in their toothpaste or they're using a daily antiseptic mouthwash, and destroying the microbiome, killing the good bacteria along with the bad bacteria. Then it's shutting down nitric oxide production. Their blood pressure goes up. You lose the protective benefits of exercise. And it's all because we're destroying the microbiome.
Wow. What about the role? I want to go back to that. And we've touched on that on other episodes of the show, which I think is just so fascinating, the role of the oral microbiota in blood pressure maintenance and blood flow and so much more. But what about, like, you know, eating dark leafy greens? Like one of the benefits of eating dark leafy greens, I recommend eating, you know, the consumption of dark leafy greens all the time, is that these foods are rich in, you know, nitrates, right?
That's right.
Nitrite, rather. Or
it's mainly nitrate. That's the predominant molecule in green leaf. So the darker the green leafy vegetable, typically the higher the nitrate content. So, but nitrate is inert in humans. So we don't have an enzyme to convert the nitrate into usable forms of nitric oxide. So we're 100% dependent upon the oral bacteria. So there's at least 3 steps in that pathway. Number 1, you got to get enough nitrate from the food you eat. Number 2, you must have the right the oral microbiome, right balance of the bacteria. And then number 3, you must have stomach acid production. So if we look at the standard American diet and the standard American lifestyle, number 1, we don't eat enough green leafy vegetables, so we're not getting enough nitrate in our diet. 2 out of 3 Americans use mouthwash every day, killing the microbiome. Most people, probably 99 out of 100, are using fluorinated toothpaste. Fluoride's an antiseptic, kills the bacteria. And then number 3, which is a major problem, is the proton pump inhibitors. Anything that inhibits stomach acid production. So without stomach acid, we can't make nitric oxide in the lumen of the stomach. And now we're finding that, you know, people have been on these drugs. 200 million prescriptions written every year in the U.S. for proton pump inhibitors. And that's not even counting the over-the-counter purchases. Now you can go to your corner store and you can buy Prilosec, Prevacid, Nexium over-the-counter. And people have been taking these for 10, 15, 20 years. And now there's evidence that if you've been on these drugs for 4 years, you have 30 to 40% higher incidence of heart attack, stroke, and Alzheimer's.
Wow.
All because it's inhibiting nitric oxide production, reducing blood flow, enhancing insulin resistance, causing diabetes, and that's the basis of chronic disease.
So these antacid drugs block production of nitric oxide?
Absolutely. Actually, from both pathways. So we talked about the bacteria, and we also talk about the function of the enzyme. So these particular, called proton pump inhibitors, it's specifically this class of antacids. They actually inhibit an enzyme called DDAH, and I won't talk about the biochemistry that much, but the inhibition of this enzyme leads to an increase in a molecule called asymmetric dimethyl L-arginine, or ADMA. And if you review the literature, you'll find that ADMA is an inhibitor of nitric oxide production. So these drugs, proton pump inhibitors, are basically shutting down systemic nitric oxide production from the bacteria, from the stomach acid, and in the lining of the blood vessels. So the consequence of that is you lose the regulation of blood flow, you get increased inflammation, oxidative stress, and immune dysfunction, and those are the hallmarks of chronic disease. Wow. And causes plaque instability, heart attack, stroke, and now vascular dementia and Alzheimer's.
And that's to say nothing of the fact that they also block mineral absorption and vitamin B12.
If you look at the side effects, so these drugs were first approved in the late 80s for the acute treatment of gastroesophageal reflux disease. So there were never any long-term safety studies on any of these drugs before they went before the FDA. The longest study that I reviewed when it was approved was maybe several weeks, maybe month, 2 months at the most. There was never any long-term studies on taking this for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. The safety data is coming now at the expense of the consumer or the patient. So yeah, if you look now, what's known risk factors of antacids, you can't absorb things like magnesium. You can't absorb B vitamins, selenium, chromium, iodine. You become nutrient deficient. You can't absorb calcium, so you get brittle bones, hip fractures. Clear data now showing kidney disease, kidney failure. And that's just the short list of side effects and risk of taking an antacid. So we have to get people off of these drugs. I mean, if you go back and look at like the Vioxx and the Celebrex from 20 years ago, the COX-2 inhibitors, same thing, causing heart attacks, strokes, and you know what? The pharmaceutical companies took them off the market, and now they got a black box warning on them. And I think the PPIs are more dangerous than the COX-2 inhibitors were 20 years ago.
Wow.
There needs to be, the patients need to be informed of this risk because it's a real risk, and they need to be informed. And I think if you've got an educated consumer and the physician or the drug companies inform them of the risk, so what we have to do is weigh the risk and the benefits. right? What's the benefits of taking this drug, and then what's the risk? And there's really no benefit for PPIs, and the risk are heart attack, stroke, Alzheimer's, kidney disease, kidney failure, hip fractures, brittle bone, osteoporosis. So nobody in their right mind would take this drug if they were properly informed.
Well, why do people get gastroesophageal reflux?
Well, paradoxically, it's an insufficient production of stomach acid. Because here's what happens. Digestion happens in the mouth. So when we masticate our food, we swallow our food, and in order for protein to be broken down into amino acid, it requires stomach acid production. So you need this pepsinogen to be converted to pepsin. You need these enzymes that break down proteins in the constituent amino acids. That requires stomach acid. Without stomach acid, then we can't break down proteins into amino acids. We empty these peptide fragments into our gut, and then the body rejects it. The body receives it as an antigen. Then we start making antibodies against it. And that's the basis for foodborne allergies. I mean, we didn't have all these foodborne allergies when we were, at least when I was a kid. Now people are, allergic to milk and gluten and peanuts and, you name it.
Yeah.
It's because they're giving these babies early in life antacids because they're spitting up. And they're completely shutting down stomach acid production. They're developing antigens against foods that they normally eat. And it's creating autoimmunity.
Wow.
So what's happening is when your body has something that it doesn't like, it tries to get rid of it. So if you've got undigested protein due to insufficient stomach acid production, it tries to expectorate it. And it's reflux. And so even though there may be a little bit of acid in there, it causes some irritation to the esophagus and to kind of the junction up here, and you get Barrett's esophagus. And, there's some data showing that it leads to gastroesophageal cancers.
So your body isn't properly able to break down these proteins.
That's right.
And so it's like literally trying to expectorate. It's like it's trying to get rid of it.
It's trying to get rid of it. It's like if you eat a salad with E. coli on it.
Yeah.
What do? You throw up, you vomit. That's the body's way to get rid of it. But if it goes too far down, what do? You get diarrhea because your body's trying to get it out of my body.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. If you're eating protein, whether it's plant or animal, and you can't break it down, your body's saying, hey, I don't recognize this. Because humans are never designed to assimilate foreign proteins, whether it's a plant protein or an animal protein. What we do is we take those proteins, we break them down into the constituent amino acids, and then we make human proteins out of those amino acids. But we never assimilate foreign proteins or peptides into a human protein. So if you can't break down proteins and amino acids, then you get reflux. So the cure for reflux is not antacids, it's to give acid. So I tell people all the time, number one, stop taking those. You got to wean off of them kind of gradually, but then take some apple cider vinegar before a meal.
Does that help?
Yeah, you acidify the lumen of the stomach. It's basically flavored acetic acid. And now you can break down proteins into amino acids. You can actually absorb nutrients. And it starts the whole digestion process.
How do you take it? You take
is it teaspoon? You don't need much.
Diluted with water?
You can. Yeah, just put it in water. It doesn't taste great, obviously. So if you can stomach it, just take a teaspoon and just chug it back. Or just put it in 2 or 3 ounces of water, and that'll acidify it. Water's unbuffered, and just take it back.
What are your thoughts on digestive enzyme supplements and betaine, HCl supplements and the like? I sometimes will take them. I don't have, my digestion is pretty good, but I just feel like occasionally if I'm having a heavy meal, like a protein and fat rich meal, I get the sense that it's like lightening the load somewhat, and it aids in digestion. It could be purely placebo, but do you have any thoughts on those?
No, I take digestive enzymes, especially if I'm going to eat a really good wholesome meal. I don't think we need it, but if I'm going to go out and kind of splurge and eat things that are
like Brazilian barbecue or something,
then I'll take some digestive enzymes, because look, any help we can get to facilitate that process, then it's just going to help break down the foods we eat and lead to less discomfort, bloating, and all that. So yeah, I'm a big fan of digestive enzymes.
Wow. So, and how many people today are taking these proton pump inhibitor drugs?
Well, it was the first $1 billion drug, proton pump inhibitors, back in the early 90s. It was approved in the late 80s, early 90s. I think the data were, when I reviewed it a couple of years ago, 200 million prescriptions are written every year. So what is that? half of the population. What's the population of the U.S. now?
And now they're available over the counter.
Yeah, now you get over the counter. So I don't even know. I don't even have the numbers on the over-the-counter purchases. I would venture to guess probably 80% of the population at some point's taken a proton pump inhibitor.
My dad takes them. And my dad recently actually was low in vitamin B12, which is odd because my dad's an omnivore. My dad eats meat.
Well, look, I mean, if you don't have stomach acid, you can't absorb B vitamins. You can't absorb iron. I mean, people become anemic. You need stomach acid to absorb most nutrients.
Man, we've been led so astray.
That's right. If I wanted to make you sick, here's the deal. I tell people all the time, and I joke, but it's really not a joke. It's very serious. If I wanted to make you chronically ill and dependent upon drug therapy for the rest of your life, I'd tell you to eat the standard American diet. I'd get your cholesterol below 200, and I would give you a proton pump inhibitor and antacids. So now you become nutrient deficient, become vitamin D deficient because you don't have cholesterol. You become testosterone and estrogen deficient because you don't have cholesterol to make these hormones. And there you go. You're ill for the rest of your life, and we're going to have to put you on a drug. Multiple drugs, by the way, because once we put you on 1 or 2 drugs, we're going to need 2 or 3 other drugs to mitigate the effects of those drugs, and you become a really good customer with long-term value.
Hello, polypharmacy.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a great financial model, obviously, but it's at the expense of our health and well-being.
You said something earlier that was so shocking and heartbreaking. You said that the safety data on these drugs is emerging now at the expense of the people, which is just like... It's just shocking that's permitted.
Yeah, look, the FDA has an obligation and a responsibility to protect us.
Yeah.
That's why this organization or this agency was created. But unfortunately, there's too much influence by Big Pharma. There's so much money to be made on drug therapy that, okay, let's look at the efficacy. And if you watch, I don't watch TV anymore, but when I did, if you watch a 60-second commercial at night for drugs, 45 to 50 seconds of that commercial are side effects. And if you read the fine print at the bottom, so it takes them 60 seconds to tell a 15-second story. The other 45 seconds are potential side effects, which are legally required to disclose to you. But nobody's paying attention to that. They paint pretty pictures and show great effects from these. But if you listen to the disclosures or read the fine print, nobody in their right mind would take these drugs.
Do you have any thoughts on Semaglutide? I mean, it's obviously a drug that's in the news all the time these days.
Well, these are peptides. They're signaling peptides. Insulin's a peptide, a 21 amino acid peptide. So they are known physiological mediators and signals that are in the form of peptides. So I think if we can recapitulate what normally happens, if these are naturally occurring peptides that signal, that influence satiety and give us a feeling of fullness, and we can suppress an appetite and get people to lose weight, then I think it has some benefit in there. But again, it's risk and benefit. I think if you've got a morbidly obese person who hasn't been able to lose weight for many years, then this is a great crutch for them, because it certainly does suppress appetite and it really does effectively lose weight. But, what is at the expense of? It's at the expense of bone loss, bone degradation, muscle mass. So you get sarcopenia, osteopenia. There's some evidence of gastroparesis and things like that. So if you can understand what those side effects are and then take the steps to mitigate those and prevent bone loss, prevent muscle loss, and the best way to do that is take, amino acids.
Protein.
So you don't have to break your fast. You just take amino acids and you shut off protein degradation, and you turn on protein synthesis, so you're not losing bone, you're not losing muscle. And then obviously, things like our nitric oxide will help improve gastric motility, prevent gastroparesis. So you can use, any drug can be effective if you understand the mechanism of action and then take the steps to mitigate the risk.
Yeah, I have a family member actually now. This family member has tried dieting in the past and seems to have just derived very low satiety from food, generally, And he started taking Ozempic, and over the past, he's definitely lost some weight. I think his weight has plateaued a little bit. I think something that that many people don't realize with these drugs is that you still have to put in effort. You do actually have to change the way that you're eating. And you have to resistance train if you're not already, to preserve your muscle, because as you mentioned, you are.
And you still got to burn calories.
You still have to burn calories.
You got to break down the fat. So you have to be thermogenic. You have to break down the fat. But at the very beginning, you have to reduce your caloric intake, especially if you're not active. That's the reason people become obese, because they consume all these calories, they're not burning, and it's stored as fat.
Well, I brought it up because I just wonder, obviously this drug is trending on a mega scale at this point. And it's like, is this going to be a situation where, the long-term safety data comes out 10 years from now, later at the expense of the people? I was just in D.C., speaking at a symposium, the Brain and Environment Symposium, and it was just shocking how many chemicals are allowed, these industrial chemicals are allowed on the market. People are exposed to them occupationally, via hobbies, but also through the food supply, or through, inadvertent exposures through groundwater, through, air pollution, that, we're only now later starting to figure out are causal with regards to really serious neurodegenerative conditions like Parkinson's disease. Herbicides and pesticides like paraquat, like rotenone. Industrial solvents like trichloroethylene and perchloroethylene that are still being used in dry cleaners and are easily able to infiltrate groundwater. They're volatile organic compounds, so they evaporate incredibly easily. They're used literally in animal models to create Parkinson's disease, and we're using them commercially in all these different applications and have been for years. And it's just crazy, the world that we live in now, where these chemicals, where they're that these corporations really are just allowed to flood the market. Literally, no pun intended, with these compounds. And the long-term safety data emerges only decades later, again at the expense of the people.
Well, here we are. We've gone through this for the past 4 years, right? Let's experiment and see what the long-term safety data is, or of things that's completely untested and unproven. And it's an experiment gone horribly wrong. And I think it's just one example of that's occurring. So, it all gets back to the basis of chronic disease, right? It's your body's missing something that it needs, or it's exposed to a toxin. So we already talked about nutrient deficiency with lack of stomach acid. People are nutrient deficient, and going back to the days of Linus Pauling, he was a big, advocate of that. All chronic disease is due to nutrient deficiency. But now I think we can expand upon that, because it's not just nutrient deficient. You can be repleted in nutrients, but if you're exposed to these chemicals that are shutting down normal metabolism, then you can't overcome that. You've got to rid your body of these toxins and then take steps to prevent exposure or re-exposure to that. So the only way to do that I know is get a home filtration system. Don't drink municipal water. Certainly don't cook or bathe or drink municipal water. You have to filter all this crap out.
You do?
Yeah, or else you're going to get sick.
Does fluoride in drinking water concern you?
Absolutely. We have an epidemic of hypothyroidism. And fluoride competes with iodine for binding to the thyroid receptor and reducing T4 to T3, which is active hormone. So, fluoride is a huge problem. It kills your thyroid. It's an antiseptic. The reason they put it in the municipal water is to prevent bacterial spoilage of the water you're drinking.
I thought they put it in the water to help at the population level prevent cavities.
Well, maybe in the 40s or 50s that was thought to be the case, but it's really an antiseptic.
Wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And it's rat poison. If you look on the back of a fluorinated toothpaste, it says, do not swallow. If you swallow this, contact poison control. It's fluoride. It's the old rat poison. It used to be sodium fluoride. And yet they're putting it in kids' toothpaste, putting it in adult toothpaste, and they're putting it in our water supply. And we wonder why we have a sick population.
Yeah. So many people. I feel like women in particular, at least from my non-clinical vantage point, seem to suffer from hypothyroidism. It's very common.
Yeah. And what do? They give you T4 or Synthroid, which is an inactive hormone. So if you're iodine deficient and you're exposed to fluoride and they give you Synthroid or T4, there's no way your body can convert it. In fact, that's the reason your hypothyroidism.
And iodine is found primarily in animal products, animal food.
Finally, the only food supply we get it from is like seaweed or kelp. I mean, the major source. Yeah, animals get it from the grass, but it's minute amounts. So, I supplement with iodine every day because I know I'm not getting it. I don't eat a lot of seaweed. I eat sushi on occasions, but it's not part of my daily diet. And you don't get enough iodine from iodized salt to give optimal levels of what you need to. Number one, you need iodine to make stomach acid. Number two, you need iodine for normal thyroid function. Number three, iodine is part of our immune system and how you kill off invading pathogens. So if you're iodine deficient, it's kind of follows the same trend of nitric oxide. If you're nitric oxide deficient, you develop high blood pressure, ED, and you become immunocompromised. If you're iodine deficient, you can't make stomach acid, you have hypothyroidism, and you become immunocompromised.
Wow. So you take iodine every day?
Every day.
What are some other supplements? What's your daily supplement regimen like?
I get up every morning around 5 or 5:30, and then I go and I take an algae product, a spirulina and a chlorella.
Why do you take that?
Well, because it contains a lot of micronutrients. And two, it acts as a binder. So then after I do that, I go sit in my sauna, 170 degrees for 30 minutes. And then during that time, I'm sweating, I'm detoxing. I open up my Hallow app, I do my prayers, I do meditation, and I just start my day with gratitude. I woke up today, a lot to be grateful for. And so that's how I start my day. I eat my last meal at 5:30 or 6, and I don't eat until lunch the next day. So a 16 to 18-hour fast every day. And then I've been taking this product. It's desiccated organ meat. Desiccated wild bison organ meat. And so I take 6 of those capsules from a company called Wild Mamas, really good group of people. And then they also make a salmon roe. So, there's some ambivalent data, not ambivalent data, but kind of, is are fish oils good, or are they rancid by the time you take them? So what I like to get natural, I like to get nutrients naturally, right? So there's nutrients naturally found in algae products, the chlorella and spirulina. Organ meats are nutrient dense, and then the salmon roe has all the fish oils, the EPA, the DHA that's from a natural source. It's not synthesized, it's not processed.
Is this a salmon roe supplement, or you're eating salmon roe?
No, it's a supplement. It's a desiccated, yeah. Take 6 capsules of those, and then that's my morning routine. And then, obviously I take a lozenge in the morning to help blood flow and circulation when I get out of bed. And then at night I'll take magnesium, just because everybody's deficient in magnesium. And plus it helps me sleep. And then, in the morning, then I'll take some amino acids. Again, it doesn't break my fast. But as I'm doing that 16-hour fast, I don't want to start breaking down protein and breaking down muscle. So I take the amino acids to shut off protein degradation and turn on protein synthesis. So I'm not breaking down fat or muscle and bone during my fasting period. And really, that's it. That's simple. And then, I work out every day, and I eat a light lunch, eat a modest dinner, but a balanced diet in moderation.
Do you try to hit, is there a certain protein target that you try to hit every day?
No, I don't. I don't count proteins. I've learned to eat until I get full. Used to years ago, I would try to, because we grew up poor and you had to eat everything on your plate, right? So then it's a taught mechanism.
Yeah.
So then, you just try to eat and engorge yourself, and then you're miserable, you're bloated, you can't sleep at night, and like, okay, I can fix this. So the minute I've learned to eat slower, and you start to get that satiety quicker, and you don't overeat. So as soon as I feel like I'm completely satiated, then I just stop eating. And a lot of times there's still a lot of food on my plate, but I'm not going to put myself through the misery of being stuffed and bloated and not able to sleep.
Yeah. And what are your favorite kinds of foods? Like, I'm trying to get at, like, what is the Nathan Bryan dietary pattern?
Look, I got an 800-acre cattle ranch, so I raise my own beef.
You do?
I'm a beef eater, yeah.
You haven't sent me any.
No, we take the calves right off their mom. So all they've done is get breast milk, and then they'll eat a little bit of grass, and then when they're probably 500, 600 pounds, I'll take them, and I've got a nutritionist that develops a growing ration for me. So we'll take them, wean them off their mom, put them in a feedlot. We don't give them hormones, we don't give them vaccines, and we feed them kind of a growing ration that's balanced in fat, protein, and carbs. And it basically allows them to get, to convert the fat from yellow to white, get all the marbling. We grade out USDA prime beef, but it's the best beef in the world.
Wow.
And then we grow our own vegetables. We don't buy vegetables from the store. We fertilize our soil. We don't use herbicides or pesticides. And we do soil samples every year so we know what's missing in our soil and then what we give back what's missing. So now the vegetables that we grow in this soil are actually nutrient dense.
Wow.
But no, I eat a lot of red meat, some chicken, a little bit of seafood, and then, fresh vegetables. Eat a salad usually before every meal. Some potatoes. I love potatoes. I'm a meat and potatoes guy, but I try to limit that sometimes the best I could, especially if I'm not going to be busy and working out to burn those calories from the carbs.
I've changed my mind on potatoes. I mean, I think that there's this, a lot of people think that potatoes are this like throwaway fattening food, but if you actually look at what's called the satiety index, a boiled potato is like the most satiating food that you can eat.
Yeah.
Which is odd.
No, I love potatoes.
In most, maybe not all, but in most satiety studies, high protein foods, protein comes out on top, which is why we say protein is the most satiating macronutrient. But I guess semi-counterintuitively, in what's called the satiety index, they've looked at like baked, boiled potatoes, and they find that it's the most satiating food you could eat. And it's not like it's a nutrient.
I like what you're saying.
Yeah, you like what I'm saying. It's oddly satiating, and it doesn't count if you're throwing butter on it and chives and sour cream and bacon and thing. No, it's all good. I mean, I do that. I love a baked potato with butter, but for being a pure starch, it's oddly satiating. It's more satiating than you would, I guess, expect. And it's not like it's a nutrient poor food. I mean, it's loaded with potassium.
Well, I never eat a carb in isolation. When I eat a carb, it's always with a protein, always with a steak or red meat or, some protein. But I never just eat a carb in isolation.
Right.
I don't think. No.
Maybe whole fruit, but that's like fiber.
Yeah, I don't eat a lot of fruit.
Interesting. Why's that?
I don't know. I've never eaten a lot of fruit, even as a kid. But, I go and I do labs periodically. I do a full workup, usually once or twice a year. And all of my labs have been, I've been sick in over 25 years.
Wow.
So it seems to, I don't get away from what works. Right?
Yeah.
This seems to work for me and I don't want to change it.
Yeah. And do you grow your own dark leafy greens?
Yeah, so we grow the vegetables that we like and eat. I've got a couple kids at home, and so they like, they like sweet corn on the cob. We grow cucumbers, we grow tomatoes, peppers. We make our own salsa, onions, squash, green beans.
Wow.
Peas, black-eyed peas, zipper peas.
Just enough to feed your family, or do you sell them?
No, just enough to feed our family.
Wow. You're so lucky that you get to do that.
Yeah, no, I'm very fortunate and blessed to do that, but it's hard work. It's hard work. But I think it's worth the hard work because I know that the food that we eat, that me and my family are eating, is free of chemicals, free of pesticides, herbicides, free of hormones and vaccines and toxins, and it's just whole nutrient-dense food.
The pesticide thing to me is so crazy. Like, I don't know how deep a dive you've done into that whole situation, but it's the dissonance. I'm just thinking about like when you post about pesticides and organic and whatever on social media, the pushback that you get from so many people, and yet these compounds are toxic. Maybe not at the doses that you're being exposed to them, in conventional produce necessarily. I don't actually know, but
at one serving, probably not. But over a course of a life of 50, 60 years that it just accumulates.
Right. Yeah.
Because most of these are fat soluble. Right. So unless you're doing things to mobilize fat and break down fat and mobilize these toxins and excrete them, they just build up over time. Your body stores them. And so that's why I think it's important that people take binders before they get in a sauna or before they do some type of detox regimen. Because you can mobilize these toxins, but if you don't bind them and excrete them, you're just mobilizing them and you're going to re-expose yourself to them and probably going to get sicker before you get better. So things like activated charcoal, things like glutathione or the Corella and the spirulina, or the bentonite clay, things like that you can take prior to a detox or during the detox, then it helps bind those toxins, and you sweat it out, you poop it out, you pee it out, and you exhale it out. It's normal excretion. But you've got to have a binder on board, and that's why, for me, the Corella and the spirulina is serving two purposes. One, it's repleting a lot of micronutrients, but also helping me bind and excrete the toxins that I'm exposed to, because as you know, we both travel a lot. We're staying in hotels. We're in airplanes every week, and we're eating out, probably more than we should.
Yeah.
So we have to continually detox.
But binders, when you take a binder like activated charcoal, it's binding what's in your gut. It's binding what's in the lumen of your gut. Is it not? It's not
right.
It's not sucking out from your circulation.
Yeah, but if you're mobilizing toxins, and we excrete toxins by several routes, right? We breathe out. It's a major form of excretion of toxins. We sweat, we urinate, and we defecate. So having good bowel movements is probably one of the most effective ways for good toxin removal. And I think that's one of the benefits of the activated charcoal was it helps bind a lot of things that are in the gut, whether it's parasites or something that's a little bit noxious to us if you've eaten something that wasn't good for you. And a lot of these pesticides, if we eat them, they'll kill the bacteria in the gut, causing dysbiosis, causing leaky gut, causing systemic disease. So I think it's good on occasions just to do a activated charcoal or something just to help clean out the toxins in the gut.
I wonder if toxins are spilled from systemic circulation back into the gut, because we often think about the gut as a one-way, what's in the gut. A lot of what's in the gut obviously enters, we absorb and assimilate, nutrients and energy. And but I know, obviously we spill bile acids, from the liver into the gut. I wonder if, if that is a route of detoxification. If we
Yeah, there's diffusion. Obviously, the molecules follow a concentration gradient. And so if you got high toxins in the gut, then obviously that gradient or that osmosis is going to occur into the bloodstream, because the microcirculation in the gut is enormous. I mean, we have enormous blood supply to the gut, and for a reason, right? We want to absorb the nutrients from the guts, make it systemic. But also, if we're toxic in the gut, then it's going to follow that concentration gradient, get into the bloodstream, it's going to be systemic.
So, but so I guess the question is taking an oral binder like activated charcoal, is that binding, is all that's doing binding what's already present in the lumen of the gut, or is it able to bind toxins that are potentially, excreted into the gut from the liver?
Well, I think it's similar to dialysis, right? We're creating a concentration gradient that then allows these toxins to move down that gradient, and we excrete it in the gut. So if you're highly toxic in the gut, then you're going to be highly concentrated, and those molecules are going to diffuse into the bloodstream because of that concentration gradient. Now, if we take charcoal and we excrete it, then there's the diffusion in the opposite direction.
Wow, into the gut.
Right, into the gut, and so it helps excrete it. So it's all about, putting a dialyzing membrane on here, and you have a high salt concentration here and water over here, and then over time you can actually dilute that because the water is going to diffuse in there, and you're going to reach some type of homeostasis.
Wow.
So it's the same thing. And then that's the beauty, and that's really the purpose of our epithelial cells, of our endothelial cells. And if there's a breakdown in that barrier function, then we've got open borders.
Yeah.
And we all know the problems with open borders.
Yeah. Yes, we do. And also psyllium husk, right? Psyllium husk is really effective as well, because it essentially sequesters bile acids and disallows
and then also,
you from reabsorbing them.
And it's expansive too. So it's almost like filling a sponge, and it's just cleaning the sides of your intestines as it's going down. So I think it provides benefit from there, and also, it's detoxifying. But I think its main mechanism of action is it induces gastric motility, because it's expanding it and activating the smooth muscle of the walls, and you get this peristalsis, and you can improve, bowel movements and get regular.
If you're not peeing, pooping, and sweating regularly on a regular basis,
you're toxic.
Yeah.
That's right.
How many bowel movements a day should we be having? It's like, I guess it differs from person to person, but generally one, right, is like...
One at the absolute minimum.
Yeah.
I take a fiber at night before I go to bed. And I think that's probably why I wake up early, because I wake up with the urge to poop.
To go, wow.
And usually I have one massive bowel movement in the morning, and then I'm done for the day.
Is it a psyllium husk supplement, or is it a different kind of fiber?
No, I don't use the psyllium husk. I use a fiber by Garden of Life. And this is, my good friend David Perlmutter, Dr. Perlmutter.
Love David.
Yeah. I think he helped create that, and obviously, I respect his science and his clinical acumen and putting forth products that obviously help the gut. So I take that. It's it's one of those things you got to put it in water, mix it, and take it immediately. I don't know if it'll just gel up. So then you can.
Yeah, there's probably some psyllium.
There's probably some in there.
Yeah, I would imagine. Psyllium husk is great. I take it fairly regularly. Because all the data on its impact on, lipid homeostasis, like lipids like LDL, cholesterol. Not that that I think. Not that I think that for somebody with otherwise healthy labs needs to hyperfixate on LDL, but I think just in general it's a good it makes sense that for the reason why fiber is beneficial from a lipid standpoint is that it increases the availability of the LDL receptor on the liver. So I think by making the liver more effective, more efficient at recycling these lipoproteins, I think that's likely a good thing. Insofar as it has this capacity to bind toxins in the liver, or in the gut rather, I think that's beneficial.
And then there's
blood sugar regulation,
and prebiotics in there, short chain fatty acids.
Yeah. To
give these bacteria, a prebiotic to repopulate and help restore normal gut microbiome.
Yeah, fibers is super important.
Yeah, and I think the data, if you look, the number one prevention for colon cancer in adults is fiber. So why wouldn't you take it? To help regulate bowel movements and to prevent colon cancer? Seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah. What's your take on the carnivore diet? There's a lot of people that obviously advocate for meat-only diets today, downplay the potential benefits of dietary fiber and the like. What's your take on that?
I think everybody's different. And I know people who are straight carnivore. I know people who are straight vegans. I know physicians who are good friends who are carnivore and straight vegans. And they both seem to be healthy.
Yeah.
But I think it's individualized. I think we evolved to get our nutrients from a diverse source of foods. I've tried a straight carnivore for probably 10 days. And, I didn't dislike it. I don't know if I felt any different. I probably got a little leaner, maybe lost a pound or two of fat. But I've been the same body weight for probably 30 years, give or take 3 or 4 pounds.
Well, there's also what's called a protein-sparing modified fast, which is essentially just like a pure protein diet to lose fat really quickly. It's not meant for long-term, for being sustained long-term, but that sounds like essentially it's what you did, and that's like evidence-based.
I also did a very horrible experiment one time too. For Lent, I gave up red meat for 40 days.
Why'd you do that? Oh, for Lent?
For Lent, and it was the worst experience of my life. And I'll never do it again, because my body needs red meat. There's this, I haven't read much on it, but there's this eat your blood type. I'm O positive. There's a lot of evidence out there, a lot of suggestions that people with my blood type need red meat. We need high protein. But I felt awful for 40 days not trying to eat red meat. And that was the realization to me that my body needs red meat.
Yeah.
For me to thrive and operate. And, I was lethargic. It was like I couldn't think. I had brain fog, and I didn't feel good. And then once Easter came and I loaded up on red meat, and I've never done that again.
I've never felt better than after a steak and a bowl of greens,
Yeah.
Like, it's to me the best meal.
Well, that's my meal. A wedge salad or, a dark green salad, and then a juicy steak, medium rare to medium with, some broccolini or a baked potato. Come on, doesn't get any better than that. Yeah.
Yeah, the humans are incredibly adaptable, man. That's I think why we've been so successful as a species. To say that we're meant to eat, one way or another, I think belies the diversity and adaptability of the human species.
And I think too, look, the data on if you have advanced coronary disease and you're at risk for heart attack, then I think if the work of Joel Kahn, who's a good friend, a cardiologist, and Caldwell Esselstyn and Dean Ornish, their work is pretty convincing that if you take patients with advanced coronary disease and put them on a strict plant-based diet and you see regression of disease, that data is pretty indisputable. But I think that's an extreme to where they almost, they're fear-based, right? Because they know that if they don't do this, they're going to die of a heart attack. And so it's very difficult, and even to their own admission, to get people on a strict plant-based diet. But what's the alternative? You die or you do it.
I think that the study that they often cite, though, is that Ornish study where they found plaque regression. But that was not just a diet-only study. That was a full-on lifestyle intervention. Yeah.
No, I agree. It's complete lifestyle. But I think the most important common denominator in those diets is really sugar restriction. So certainly you're restricting sugar on a straight carnivore diet, and you're still getting some carbohydrates, some sugars in the plant base. But again, it's diet and lifestyle, and it's complete lifestyle modification.
Yeah, and even the whole fiber thing. Like I'm big on eating dietary fiber. I think fiber is super important, for colon health and all that stuff. But there was actually I tweeted this recently because Sean Baker posted it, which we disagree on a few things, but but I think he's brilliant, and and there's this really cool paper that people can check out. It's basically talks about how incredibly metabolically flexible the human gut is. We like to think that the gut needs fiber, but there are many different substrates that the gut can thrive on potentially, because we have over the course of if we needed dietary fiber to be healthy, there are many parts of the world where humans have flourished, historically, where the dietary fiber is hard to come by. Like the Inuit, for example, they just wail and blubber, and that's the entirety of their diet, And so, yeah, I just think it just goes to support the notion that there is no such thing as a one size fits all diet.
Yeah, and your body adapts to what you give it.
Highly adaptive. Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Viagra is one of these compounds that I think is interesting and modulates this nitric oxide pathway.
Well, it potentiates nitric oxide.
What does that mean?
Means that drugs like Viagra are dependent upon the cell's ability to make nitric oxide. So if the patient who's taking Viagra, if they can't make nitric oxide, then the drug is without effect.
Got it.
So and we know that 50% of the men that are prescribed Viagra for erectile dysfunction don't respond with better erections. So nitric oxide activates the second messenger, and Viagra prevents the breakdown of that second messenger. But without nitric oxide being produced, there's no second messenger, so that Viagra can't work. So, and I think there's a misconception of Viagra, because I still today hear a lot of physicians say, oh yeah, you can take Viagra, it's a nitric oxide donor. No, it's not a nitric oxide donor. You need to review your biochemistry. Nitric oxide turns the switch on, and Viagra keeps it on. That's the reason you're warned against 4-hour erections and unsafe drop in blood pressure. But the non-responders are non-responsive because they're not making any nitric oxide to activate that second messenger system.
And is this because they're not consuming enough nitrate in the diet, or what?
It's because, they may not be getting enough nitrate. Typically the reason is the enzyme in the lining of the blood vessel is uncoupled and dysfunctional. Because when we get vasodilation, so it's nitric oxide that's produced in the endothelial cells, and that nitric oxide diffuses into the smooth muscle, where it activates an enzyme called guanylyl cyclase. It leads to cyclic GMP, and then Viagra prevents the breakdown of cyclic GMP. So it's really a vascular issue, and the reason that Viagra works is it potentiates the vasodilatory effects of nitric oxide. And so, there's data showing that, people who had been on Viagra for 4 years were, protected from dementia.
Yeah.
It has exercise-enhancing performance.
Yeah.
It reduces pulmonary pressures. I think there's a couple of PD5 inhibitors now FDA approved for pulmonary hypertension. And then you mentioned before, there's a study showing that it turns on protein synthesis.
Muscle protein synthesis, yeah. On par with like 100 to 200 milligrams of testosterone.
That's a potent response.
That's it, yeah, in this one study. So how do you think it works then so it potentiates nitric oxide?
Yeah, so if we look at how nitric oxide works, and there's kind of two main pathways. There's what we call cyclic GMP dependent signaling, and there's cyclic GMP independent signaling. But most of the early data on the work on was looking at nitric oxide activating guanylyl cyclase, leading to cyclic GMP, and then cyclic GMP initiates a number of signaling cascades, right? So it turns on protein kinase G, it mobilizes calcium, smooth muscle relaxation, it turns on mitochondrial biogenesis by activation of PGC1 alpha, induces mitochondrial biogenesis, but it also can help turn on protein synthesis and prevent protein breakdown. So I think there's several different mechanisms how it can do this, but at the end of the day, it's improving blood flow, so you're getting more oxygen to the downstream cells, you're delivering more nutrients, you're improving mitochondrial function, and the energetics of the cell become much better. And now you can improve cellular turnover, you can turn on protein synthesis, and I think that's how it's working.
Is there any downside to these drugs?
Yeah, I mean, all you got to do is listen to the commercials, right? You can have an unsafe drop in blood pressure. There's vision loss, this blue vision you start to see. But really the only thing we worry about is an unsafe drop in blood pressure and then priapism, an erection lasting longer than 4 hours.
Could be the time.
Some people don't understand, but the problem is when you have a 4-hour erection, so there's no blood flow in there, right? So when you get an erection, you get engorgement and you get an increase in blood flow. But what happens, it compresses those blood vessels, the veins, so you don't get the outflow. So now you've got a shaft that has the same blood supply in it for 4 hours that's really oxygen deprived. So you're using up that oxygen. And so over time, that tissue can become necrotic.
Oh my God, wow.
And then you'll lose the function of that organ for the rest of your life. So it's a very serious condition. And, it's, you see it in sickle cell patients with vaso-occlusive crises and priapisms. And so you have to go manually and with a needle, take the blood out of the corpus cavernosum to allow that tissue to now get new blood supply in, oxygenate it, because it's basically ischemic and hypoxic for 4 hours and leads to necrosis.
That's no joke.
No, it's very serious.
Wow,
I mean, people think it's a joking matter, but no, it's a very serious clinical condition.
Wow.
And it's named after Priapus, right? The Greek god of erections. But it's
I didn't know that.
Priapus was a Greek god of the erection. He had this huge phallus and erection, so they properly named it a priapism.
Who's at risk for priapism?
Well, you see it primarily in sickle cell patients who have vaso-occlusive crises, and so there's from spinal cord injuries you can get a priapism, but really it's from Viagra and overdosing on it.
Wow. I'm not going to lie. I've taken it before a workout a few times because the pump that you get is incredible.
Yeah.
And there is this one, and I'm not recommending that people do this. There are risks, obviously, as we've just discussed. But based on this one small study, and I know a lot of people in the fitness community are not, necessarily disclosing that they're doing it, but it's fairly common. Yeah. And so I've tried it a handful of times, and it's, for me, I mean, it's been a great pre-workout.
Yeah.
On the days that I've tried it.
Improves blood flow, and if you're going to work out, you need good circulation to get oxygen to the working skeletal muscles and to, mobilize and get rid of the waste products. Then you can improve performance.
But it is fascinating that, risks aside, that by potentiating nitric oxide, boosting blood flow, that there seems to be all this upside. Potentially reduced risk for dementia.
Reduced risk of Alzheimer's, heart attack, stroke, reduces pulmonary hypertension. Improves athletic performance. So I'm not a big fan of synthetic compounds that are inhibiting biochemical reactions, but this one certainly, because it potentiates nitric oxide. So what we focused on is let's take a step up the pathway. Because if we can just restore nitric oxide production, then probably there's not a need for Viagra or PD-5 inhibitors. Because once you supply the primer or the first signaling molecule to activate all these downstream signaling, then just let the cell do its job. Let the body do its job, because it'll activate second messenger, and then phosphodiesterase activity will increase, break down cyclic GMP, and then turn the signal off. So just let the cell do its job. Give the body what it needs and let the body do its job.
Yeah.
But I think what we're finding is that if you want to use that as an ergogenic aid or as an aid for sexual function, then if we go upstream and improve nitric oxide production or take our nitric oxide products, then you can lower the dose of these, make them safer without side effects, and potentiate the effects of that.
Even further.
Wow.
Yeah, you make a nitric oxide boosting lozenge.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we make nitric oxide's a gas, right? And so we were the only people in the world who's made a solid dose form of nitric oxide gas.
A solid dose form of nitric oxide gas.
So when you put this lozenge in your mouth, we put it in this matrix that slowly dissolves over 5 to 6 minutes. And as this matrix is falling apart, these actives come together and we generate about 30 to 40 parts per million nitric oxide gas.
Wow.
So it's delivering nitric oxide in the mouth. It's absorbed buccally. It goes systemic within, we can see dilation of the carotids within 10 to 12 seconds, putting that lozenge in your mouth.
And how long does that effect last for?
If you look at, and we've done 24-hour ambulatory blood pressure measurements, so you'll see if you have high blood pressure or an elevation in blood pressure, we can bring that down within, say, 20 minutes, and it'll last 6, 8, 10 hours.
Wow.
So typically for supporting healthy blood pressure, we'll take one lozenge twice a day. We see, again, dilation of the carotids, usually 13% within 10 minutes. We can improve exercise performance. We can regress plaque deposition, potentiate the effects of PD-5 inhibitors. But, that's something different than any other product out there, because all other nitric oxide products are giving you arginine, citrulline, precursors and substrates, and hoping your body can convert it to nitric oxide. And it's kind of like the Synthroid, right? You can't give an inactive ingredient or precursor if your body's unable to utilize it. And that's the problem with all these nitric oxide products out there, is they're giving you precursors and you cross your fingers and close your eyes and hope your body can convert it. But the problem is you can't. That's the reason you're nitric oxide deficient. And now there's companies out there selling you grapeseed extract and pomegranate and gummies and chews, creating sugar and dysbiosis and completely shutting down nitric oxide production, selling beets in capsules. So you need a certain amount of nitrate as a bolus to see a nitric oxide effect if you have the right bacteria and if you have stomach acid. And typically, even if you're looking at the highest concentration of beet powder or kale or greens, at best it's going to be about 6 to 9% nitrate. So in order to get the 400 milligrams you need, you're going to have to take probably 4 to 6 grams, 4 to 6,000 milligrams of that product to see any appreciable nitric oxide. And yet people are selling beet powder in a capsule, which is 700 milligrams. I mean, the math doesn't work. And they obviously know consumers are somewhat convincible, because they run these ads and convince a lot of people to buy these. But the math doesn't work.
The math's not mathing.
The math's not mathing. So buyer beware.
Yeah.
Don't believe the ads. Stay away from gummies and chews. But look for nitric oxide products that actually produce nitric oxide. The analogy I use is for hormone replacement therapy, right? Nitric oxide is a hormone, so we have to replace that hormone. And if we're looking to do testosterone replacement therapy in men or hormone replacement therapy in women, what do? We give you testosterone, right? We don't give you DHEA or some precursor and hope your body makes it. We give you that hormone. And it's the same thing with nitric oxide. If you're deficient in nitric oxide, we've got to give you that hormone, the actual gas. And that's what we do that nobody else does.
Where can people, because I think on the last episode of the show we talked a bit about your products, but I don't know if we made it super easy for people to go and do a deep dive into your work. So where do you have like a central location online where people can go and check out your products?
Yeah, for products, it's n101.com.
Okay.
So it's the letter N, the number 1, the letter O, number 1.com. It's not n101.com. It's n101.com. So it's 1 nitrogen, 1 oxygen. Very simple. But yeah, we make a topical, or we make a lozenge. We make a fermented beet powder. Beets are very popular. And so, my frustration was there's companies out there selling beets that just turn your pee and your poop pink and don't do anything with nitric oxide. So we created a fermented beet powder. We pre-convert it. We take out the oxalates. We take out the beet pulp, the beet color, the beet taste, because most people, including me, don't like the taste of beets. And then we add electrolytes to it, and we put some mitochondrial ATP in there. So that's a fantastic pre-workout product or an energy product. And the idea and the hope is that, people will start using our beets as a natural energy source and get rid of the Red Bull, 5 Hour Energy, Monster, the really dangerous energy drinks that are out there. And then we make a topical nitric oxide for skincare. So topically, we got a dual chamber. You mix these two together, and it generates nitric oxide gas. It turns the skin pink because of an increase in blood flow, mobilizes stem cells, improves collagen deposition, hydration improves. Remarkable skincare product.
Does nicotinic acid work via the nitric oxide pathway?
No, nicotinic acid, nicotine receptors actually lead to vasoconstriction.
But like when the niacin flush that you sometimes get.
Oh, the niacin. No, that's an endothelium-independent source of vasodilation. So that's completely separate from nitric oxide.
Interesting.
So you can get that. So you can have endothelial dysfunction and take niacin and still get a niacin flush. And in fact, I take, failed to mention, but before I get in the sauna, I take about 750 milligrams of niacin.
The flushing niacin.
The flush, it'll light your ass up. Your ears turn red, and it's a little bit uncomfortable. But what's happening is that high dose niacin will cause lipolysis, so it breaks open the fat cell. So any toxins stored in fat cells become mobilized, and then you're in the sauna and you sweat it out.
Wow, with flushing niacin.
Yeah, and I learned this from an old physician who detoxed a lot of Vietnam vets that were exposed to Agent Orange. They were chronically ill. Developed all these different diseases, and the only way he found that he could detox them from exposure to these chemicals, these herbicides that they sprayed all over the country of Vietnam to basically eliminate the foliage so they could expose the enemy, was to 750 milligram niacin, flush them, and then put them in an infrared sauna to help detox them.
Wow.
And it's been remarkable. I mean, it's a great detox protocol.
And how does it... So, and this is independent of the nitric oxide pathway.
That's right.
Is it, and it's generally good for you, like this niacin flush?
I mean, niacin's a B vitamin.
Yeah.
Right? But at high doses, it'll cause a flush. It's partially a histamine response, then histamine will activate nitric. So it's not completely independent.
Wow.
There's some crosstalk between it. But yeah, it's a great tool to use just to replete. But I mean, this is a whopping dose, right? 750 milligrams, and the RDA is a couple hundred micrograms.
I think when I don't actually remember, but I feel like when I take it, it's like more like 100 milligrams or something like that.
Well, typically anything above 50 milligrams will cause a flush in some people.
Yeah. That's
so if you're taking 750 milligrams, get ready.
That's a lot.
Buckle up.
Yeah. Nose starts running. And wow, that's crazy. What are the top, I guess wrapping up, what are the top 3 things that people should start doing every day after listening to this to optimize their nitric oxide health, their cardiovascular, their health via this pathway?
Well, I think you just got to stop doing the things that are disrupting it. I mean, that's the simplest, and that's what we want to educate and inform. I'm not here to try to sell you supplements. I think what we try to do is give you the information you need so you can make decisions to improve your health. Mm-hmm. Nitric oxide is foundational. You're still good. You have to put in the work and do some other things, but I think if you stop using mouthwash, get rid of fluoride. If you're taking in acids, you have to stop. And then throw in some more green leafy vegetables, 20, 30 minutes of exercise a day. Now we're finding the data coming out that, you really don't even need 20 or 30 minutes. You can do a couple of minutes of high-intensity interval training, 2 to 3 minutes at a time, whether it's squats or thrusts for 2 to 3 minutes. Get your heart rate up, start breathing, that alone. So you really don't have any excuses for not moving because 2 to 3 minutes of high-intensity interval training is very beneficial. And then 20, 30 minutes of sunlight a day or an infrared sauna. But, good stuff in, bad stuff out, eat a good diet, limit your exposure to toxins, don't drink municipal water. And then, give the body what it needs, remove from the body what it doesn't need, and let the body do its job. It's regenerative by nature.
I love that. Heat and sunlight, both independently, create nitric oxide, do they not?
Yeah, so sunlight is interesting because there's the UV spectrum, the mitochondria are like the chloroplast. of plants, right? They use sun energy, light energy, and make cellular energy. But there's certain wavelengths of light, so it's really the full spectrum infrared that releases nitric oxide bound to metals. So that light will penetrate, not far, depending on what wavelength and how close to the light you are, but it'll release nitric oxide bound to metals. And then if you've got the UV spectrum, kind of the other opposite end, then that frequency of energy will cleave nitric oxide bound to thiols, cysteine thiols. So the trick is, if you're nitric oxide depleted, then there's less of these photolabile stores to be activated or released by light. But if you replete your nitric oxide, you take a nitric oxide supplement or eat some green leafy vegetables, 90 minutes later, then go out in the sun. Now you have more of these photolabile stores of nitric oxide that can be activated by light, release it, and it can normalize blood pressure.
Wow.
And that's the reason people that live near the equator have better blood pressure than people live in Scandinavia or the Arctic, for example. It's exposure to sunlight.
Sunlight's so important.
And vitamin D. Vitamin D is activating and stimulating nitric oxide production. So part of it is activation of vitamin D, which then activates nitric oxide. Populations that are deficient in vitamin D are typically deficient in nitric oxide.
Yeah, so two pathways at least that by which the sun helps to maintain healthy
but the
blood
sun's
pressure.
been demonized, over the past 40 years. Put on sunscreen and don't go out in the sun. I mean, that's the worst advice you could give.
Yeah.
Because most sunscreens are chemical toxicants and we need sunlight.
Exactly. And then you get these useful idiots on social media, of the food and chemical industry, right? Warning us to be hyper cautious with sun exposure, but to just not worry about the fact that our food supply is being flooded with these petrochemicals.
Yeah. And be sure and just put a lot of aluminum on you and sunscreens and deodorant and antiperspirants.
It's just
don't go down sun.
It's just crazy to me, but I guess that's a conversation for a whole other podcast. But yeah, we live in such backward times. But I'm so glad that we've got a warrior such as yourself, out here sharing. Fighting, sharing really good science, and helping improve the lives of so many. So thanks.
Yeah.
Nathan Scott Bryan, the man with 3 first names.
3 first names. Thanks, Max. Good to be with you. Thank you for all you do.
Where can people connect with you on social media?
I'm at Instagram at Dr. Nathan S. Bryan. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter at Dr. Nitric. I've got a YouTube channel. I encourage you to subscribe. It's Dr. Nathan S. Bryan, Nitric Oxide. And we just started the Heartbeat Happy Hour podcast.
Ooh.
So at our studio in Fort Worth. So next time you're down, come in. We'll have a conversation. I'll host you on the Heartbeat Happy Hour.
That sounds
And typically
awesome.
we'll pour us a nice good scotch and sit down and talk shop and try to solve the problems of the world.
I'm down. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.